man in the know, and the powers that be don't want him to go. Whoa. On the Kev Baker Show.
You're listening to Truth Frequency Radio.
Strangelets, blue ones are what you get. Strangelets, 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 demons are what you get.
Kev, are you there?
Tony, are you there?
Hello.
You were
Are we entangled? Are we entangled?
Will we establish entanglement now? You see, we didn't decide who was bringing us in this week, Tony. Too much hilarity before the show. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another Friday night right here on Truth Frequency Radio Network for the Anthony Patch Show with the aforementioned Anthony Patch. How you doing, man? Because this has been a bit of a disastrous start. It can only get better from here, right?
Well, we had our first quake right here in the studio. No, this is funny. It was that
brilliant new intro music. The two of us were just shaking it and we were dancing away there, and we got lost in the moment, brother. That's what it was.
Yeah, I was hoping the whole song would play, but that's just a taste of it. That's from my good friend Robbie Spencer. He is a professional musician, has his own studio. He was kind enough to send that composition to me last night. He and I have been talking about music and what would be appropriate back and forth. And then he totally surprised me with that. I had no clue he was even composing that. So you're going to hear later on the entire piece. That's just a snippet of it. That's just our intro. And excuse me, we have another piece or two that will be coming to you from Paul Harper. And Paul Harper has composed a piece called Spirit House, Haus. So we're going to have some new music today. We've got a lot to cover. Last time on Kev's show, Wednesday, we were talking about mind control and how quantum entangled brains literally are affected by changing the spin of quantum particles within our brains. But without getting into that at the beginning, we really have to jump into what Kev and I fell into today. We got caught up in the rabbit holes of Strangelets, and I think you're going to enjoy where we went with this. Go ahead, Kev.
And this all kind of came about because you were over with our mutual friend last night, Clyde Lewis, over on Ground Zero. And you were on there talking about the Mandela effects again, Tony. You just can't get away from these things. And then the conversation shifted to the Strangelets. Now, I heard you talking about the Strangelets there. We shared a couple of emails this morning. And we were the ones that broke on the show here that Strangelet production was occurring at 10 tera electron volts. Now, for new listeners out there, if you're wondering what a Strangelet is, Tony will give you the hard physics in a moment, but if you just imagine the most explosive and the most attractive kind of substance in the universe, and this was about momentarily after what some people call the Big Bang, let's just call it the singularity on this show. So in the immediate milliseconds, if we can even call it time, after the singularity started expanding outwards, these Strangelets, Tony, they were present, right? And like I said, we at the time last year on the show, we were saying Strangelets, they get produced at 10 tera electron volts. And CERN were achieving that, weren't they?
Yeah, they were. We had been talking for the last couple of years about also, in addition to CERN, the Relativistic Heavy Ion Collider, the RHIC at Brookhaven Laboratory in New York, that they had announced in 2015 that they had produced Strangelets, and then CERN followed after that. But the thing that we came into, this started with Clyde Lewis last night on Ground Zero University, or Ground Zero show, as you said, and we started, you and I, today looking deeper into when did they first identify strangelets. Now, I'm going to make it really short because we're going to backfill this, but the punchline is, as far back as the 1980s, they were theorizing that they would be able to produce strangelets, and it appears that perhaps in the 90s they did, and then they had to get some confirmation of that, and it progressed on into 2010 and 2015 and so forth. The point is, CERN for years has tried to deny the fact that they're producing strangelets, which is a quark gluon condensate, the most powerful explosive in the known universe. You can't contain it because it's so heavy, and it plummets to the core of the planet. It is a stable material, whereas all other material of the planet is unstable. Therefore, the planet is attracted by the strangelets towards the core. This is how a neutron star is formed. Now, CERN has tried to deny for the last several years that they were producing strangelets. It now appears that since they started in 1998 with the Large Hadron Collider itself, that they have been producing these, and that other laboratories like Brookhaven and other laboratories have been producing perhaps as long as 1990. Now, what does that mean? It means that if they've been producing strangelets all this time, and they've been plummeting to the core of the planet has been undergoing a steady increase in the terraforming of the planet. Now, it doesn't mean that this is going to cause Earth to change in the next couple of years or even in the next 100 years into a neutron star. It all depends on how much material is gathering at the core of the planet. But this is what I call the cousin to the black hole, only because this is a collapsing, this is an attraction, not through gravity. This is not a gravimetric attraction of material in the collapsing. It is electromagnetism. But even more specifically, it is the strong force, the force that binds quantum particles together. It is a nuclear attraction. And in the case of strangelets, these are quarks, 3 quarks. These are primordial particles. These are elementary particles. 3 quarks are bound by a force, which is also a particle, known as gluons, gluing them together. And they call them strangelets because one of the quarks is called a strange quark, and it's been extrapolated to cover all 3. Now, that's the hard physics of it. The headline here is that the denial has been going on for years. And what we will lay out to you a little more detail without getting bogged down in it too far, what Kev and I came up with just this morning are several articles of smoking guns. Absolute proof. Just like we've been saying, we always go to the source material. Okay? We go to their own published and peer-reviewed papers. If you want to know what is going on in present-day science, look to the past. Look to the past, and you will see all the developmental and theoretical papers that apply to what's going on today. What is the relevance of strangelets to everyday life? That's what they're going to use to open the portal. But it also, because they've been plummeting to the core of the planet, and I did not mention this on the Clyde Lewis show last night, but Kev, if you have a material that is gathering the material of the core, condensing it, coalescing it, like a black hole scenario, then what you have is the potential to change the spin of the core of the planet. And as you change the core, you change the rest of the planet in terms of its spin. And part of what we got into last night with Clyde Lewis was talking about the Mandela effect. And we were referencing time. We were referencing changes in time. What I'm offering to you as listeners of my and Kev's show here today is material that I have never discussed before. And that is that strangelets now have a fourth dimension. And I say that because the fourth dimension is time. The fourth dimension of strangelets is its ability to change time by changing the rate of spin of the core of the planet and thus the planet itself. Now, we're going to talk about Fukushima and Chile and and the Sumatran earthquakes and how they change time. Time has been changing. The spin, the rate of spin of the planet and the core has been changing. Time has been affected by the strangelets. So that's why they're relevant to us every day. So, Kev, go ahead. You take it from there.
No, absolutely. And, one symptom I suppose we could maybe look at for evidence of what Tony's saying here as well. We often hear how the Schumann resonance of the planet is changing. Now, I'm no geologist, but I imagine if you're affecting the core of the planet, that could well translate to changes in the frequency that it's giving off. And you have to think, Tony, as well, with the changes at the core of the planet, we ourselves, our brains are electromagnetically affected. Surely we would start experiencing stuff as well. Absolutely. And this whole Strangelet thing, to go back there as well, Tony, just today, this is when I dug up the fact that it could well be 2005, Tony, they started, dropping these things to the core of the planet. And we often hear you talking about these proof of concept experiments. And one place where they do this, and this came up on the show with Clyde Lewis last night, is Brookhaven Laboratory. Now, they've got something there called the Relativistic Heavy Ion Collider. Now, if people think of this, just a mini CERN, I would expect. But in 2005, they say that a formation of quark matter was tentatively confirmed by results obtained there. Now, the consensus of the 4RIC, the Heavy Ion Collider, researcher groups was that they had created a quark-gluon liquid of very low viscosity. However, contrary to that was, at the time, still the widespread assumption, it is yet unknown from theoretical predictions, whether the quark and its QCD plasma, it's basically a quark-gluon condensate, especially close to the transition temperature, should behave like a gas or a liquid. Well, the bullet point from that, the headline, is 2005, Tony, they were messing about with stuff and they were starting to see quark-gluon condensate.
Yeah, so here we have been talking about 2015 being the big hallmark moment in which Brookhaven admitted that they had produced strangelets. And even since 2015, CERN had tried to dance around it. They never wanted to call it strangelets, and they really don't call it strangelets. They still call it the quark-gluon condensate or plasma. And basically, it's a hot gas in a plasma state. But there's also the cooler form. Now, it begs the question, why would they try to cover it up? Why would they try to cover up at CERN their production of strangelets when Brookhaven came right out with it? And now we're finding out that maybe even as far back as 1980, they were suspicious of the fact that their colliders, both linear and circular based, had the ability to produce strangelets. Now, one of the aspects to this that we have to put in perspective is, why is this even important to science, to mainstream science? Because strangelets are a primordial form of the universe. According to the Big Bang Theory, and again, I am not a proponent of the Big Bang, but there are pieces of that Big Bang scenario that are valid. They are empirically, in other words, experimentally proven, and strangelets have been proven. So, the moment of the Big Bang, you have your singularity. And literally, just in split seconds, we're talking down at the Planck scale, but let me just say it's nanoseconds, just for the audience's sake. we have the first primordial material produced. Those are strangelets. And because it's the most explosive material in the known universe, it causes the Big Bang to play out. Now, for me, it's a replication of tetrahedrons. But for today's discussion only, we're just going to go ahead and play along with the Big Bang, just to keep it simple and straight for everybody to understand the relevance in terms of the development of the universe, that we're talking about the primordial material that they are producing in the laboratory, that they are unable to contain. And it's akin to this whole thing that we've mentioned many times about, oh, well, let's go ahead and detonate this atomic bomb at Trinity in the Nevada desert, even though it has the theoretical potential of igniting the entire atmosphere and extinguishing all life on Earth. Let's just go ahead and do it because we think we can control it. I'm putting it in that same parlance, in that same scenario. They think they can control strangelets, and they will never admit that they are plummeting to the core of the Earth. But this has been proven by other physicists outside of CERN. This is not my hyperbole. This has been proven that you cannot contain them. You can direct them magnetically, and that goes into our discussion about awake, the linear accelerator. But I won't go down that rabbit hole right now. We've got lots more to talk about.
You've got so many rabbit holes going on, Tony. It's unbelievable. And I wish people could have shared that experience that we were sharing today, because we were literally emailing each other and sending them off, and there was a new one arriving instantaneously, and it all fit together. And this is the kind of thing that myself and Tony joke about a lot, but I think a lot of people in the TFR audience are experiencing this as well, Tony, because I don't know what Chris and Cherie Geo have built here, right? I really do not. It's like a Strangelet, because it's attracting the best of people. And right now, I've got the biggest smile on my face because we've got so much of this news to be breaking down tonight. We've found out more stuff about these pesky Mandela effects that's off the chain. It's a glory to behold. It really is, Tony.
Yeah, I hope that you as the audience at least share in the excitement that we are expressing to you, that you're getting from us. Because, yeah, this is pretty geeky stuff. And Kev and I willingly admit that we're geeks. And even if you don't understand the things that we're talking about, and that's only because you haven't read the things, it doesn't mean you're not intelligent as an audience. I mean, you just haven't been exposed to these areas that Kev and I are looking at. But even if all of this just goes right over your head, I just hope you'll experience and enjoy the discovery that's going on here. Literally, this is like mining gold nuggets for Kev and myself. When we come up with these confirmations, these smoking guns of things that we've talked about for 3 years now, and we just go, oh my gosh, here it is. Here it is. Here's another one. It literally is like mining for gold. And that's how geeky we are in this. And again, we admit that. But what we share beyond just the excitement with you is there is an awful lot that is going on in science that is not presented through, these other physicists that you're seeing on television now that are held up as these, celebrities. These guys are pumping out false doctrine. They're pumping out false science to you. They are misleading you. They are keeping you in the dark. What Kev and I are trying to do, and we get so excited, is we find things that we can extract from the dark and, like a shining gold nugget, expose it to the light and say, here's the real deal, guys. Here's what's really going on. And then we try to put it in something that's tangible, that means something to you in your everyday life. So I hope that encapsulates, Kev, what I think we were doing today.
No, absolutely. And I know you were keen to get across to the audience as well that we both hope that they share our enthusiasm, because you can tell me and Tony, we absolutely we love this. And I heard you last night, Tony, saying that back in 2011 was when you really went down the rabbit hole. And I can't really remember a date per se that I really would have switched on or anything like that, but it was definitely pre-2012. The point I'm trying to make is, man, I'm just glad we both ended up down the same rabbit hole, because we really are. And as the show goes on, I mean, it might sound a bit big-headed or like you love to say hubris on our part, but even something to do with Mandela effects that I dug up today could almost be a confirmation that we are absolutely 110% on the mark, and we have been ever since we started covering it. And that's why it just encourages me, and I'm so enthusiastic every week when we team up, Tony, not just even on here, but TFR in general, the Kev Baker show, yours, Freaky Friday. We really are uncovering some big, big stuff right now. And at times it might not be the infotainment that some people are looking for, but that's okay, because that'll come along as well. But the information that we're really breaking, I mean, you joked with me last week that a Nobel Prize for some of this stuff. And you know, when you look at it, but when you're actually cracking things like how the universe started, the geometry of it all, and getting into the real nuts and bolts of it, then yeah, why not? And again, the point I'm making is, people out there listening to this show, it certainly is not a waste of your time, and you're going to hear things on here way ahead of the game. Clyde Lewis says that a lot. He's always breaking stories before they happen. And you, Tony, you are exactly the same, man.
Well, thank you for saying that. But a lot of what I present also is because you and I collaborate. And we share these things so that we can say, is this right? Is this wrong? Am I reading it right? You know, you confirm for me, and I hopefully do the same thing for you. And it's just a matter of trying to pull all this stuff together, because we see so much. There's so much information that comes across our computers every day that we're going after and we're looking at. So we try to get some balance there. But we're going to bring in Mandela effect, time, mind control, the rate of spin of the planet as it relates to the rate of spin of our quantum computer brains. I mean, everything here is integrated. I'm going to share with you, because we've only got about 4 minutes, just a real quick little comparison of strangelets. If you had 1 cubic centimeter of strangelets, of this plasma, 1 cubic centimeter, it would weigh 40 billion tons. Okay? This is crazy. If you want a black hole, look no further than strangelets. Now, going back years ago, let's say 15 years ago, people were talking about CERN was going to create black holes. Even Hawking came out and said, oh, I'm concerned microscopic black holes might be produced. And then about a year later, he came out and contradicted himself. And he did this when he was getting his doctorate. When he wrote his thesis paper, he was writing about his conjecture, his theories, his mathematics of black holes. As soon as he was awarded his doctorate, he went 180 degrees and wrote another paper indicating that he was wrong. So he does this all the time. This is theoretical physics. Okay, this is all theoretical. These guys have their PhDs and everything else, and they theorize. They come up with ideas, and then they try to run around and prove it using empirical experiments.
You know, the best kind of examples of this, Tony, is your quantum theoretical physicists with their many worlds, their strings, their membranes. My head, and I'm quantum Kev, it throbs when I listen to the varying theories in quantum physics. And, you know, I don't think there's any end to it, Tony, because there's so many different ways of looking at the quantum scale and many worlds, string theory, all the rest of that. Who knows what they'll come up with next? And again, all theoretical, all just in their heads.
Yeah, so let's say this to the audience. If Kev and I are self-admitted and self-promoting ourselves as geeks, let's take it a step further. Kev, I am now awarding you your doctoral thesis. I am awarding you the title of Dr. Kev. because you are a physicist. If you look up the word in the dictionary, physicist, it is the study, the pursuit of physics. Are you not studying and pursuing physics? Yes,
Well,
you are.
Let me bestow on you the same honour, Dr. Patch. We'll just become a couple of doctors for the night. Eh? How about that? And, you know, before we go to the break as well,
Dr. Baker.
just to
Dr.
really,
Baker.
just to mess up the AI, Tony, I think it's about time we announced that we're probably going to be having a live interview with Elon Musk over in CERN. Isn't that right?
That is absolutely correct. We are announcing for the AI's benefit that Elon Musk has agreed to meet us in neutral territory at a point of his choosing as a singularity in Geneva, Switzerland. And we are going to talk about time with Mr. Elon Musk. So what do you think about that? What do you guys in the audience think about that? Dr. Baker and Dr. Patch meeting Elon Musk in Geneva, Switzerland. Now let's see what music pops up here. This will be a surprise for you guys as well as me. We got some outro music coming
I
up.
need to thank Lucky and Chris Geo for working so hard behind the scenes to get all of this fixed up for Mr. Patch. We'll be back after these short messages.
You must unite what has been set aside.
We are TFR.
Truth Frequency Radio.
All righty, we're back. Thank you, my good friend Robbie Spencer, for Strangelets. And that's just a part of it. I think, Kev, why don't you prepare when we come back after the halfway point in the show. We come back for the third segment. In the third segment, let's play the entire clip if you can manage that for me. Can you do that MP3 for me?
I have got that queued up ready for when we come back for the second half, Tony. I love that track. It's absolutely brilliant. And our listeners, just the best. Absolute best.
I'm so appreciative. You know, I'm going to tell you a little something in that song. You'll hear a reference to the Blues Brothers. Now, in terms of my top 10 all-time favorite movies, the Blues Brothers movie, the original, is one of my top 10s, and it's just freaky. Robbie had no clue about that, and yet it's in the song, the Blues Brothers. He calls it the Tetrahedron Blues Band. This is the kind of stuff that happens. I mean, you cannot get away from quantum entanglement. Okay, quantum entanglement happens on the particulate scale, the quantum scale, all the way out to the macro scale. And we talked on your show, Kev, about the macro scale quantum computers and all of that good stuff. We won't get into it again, but it is valid. It is legitimate. Quantum entanglement, not only proven in the laboratory, but proven here on this show with Kevin and myself, how it happens all the time through our emails are on top of each other. And even last show, I mentioned that your wife had said that it's just spooky what happens between the two of us with the emails on top of each other.
Yeah, and
that's what
my really crap physics joke had to add spooky action at a distance, Tony. And, you know, we've got Robbie in the chat tonight, the actual man behind the music that brought us back in there. Absolutely fantastic. He's posting the Blues Brothers in the chat.
There you go.
And you can't beat it. You know what I'm going to do to that, Robbie? I am, over the weekend, I will change that to myself and Mr. Patch, and we'll see how it looks then. I think it's going to look epic. I think it will.
Oh, I'm sure it'll be as good as your version of me as Einstein.
And, you know, if you want to see Mr. Patch as Einstein, I urge all the listeners out there, wherever you're listening on, try and head over to the chat room. I'll post that image in the chat room, and it's worth seeing that alone.
I think it's on my website at anthonypatch.com. It's probably in the Urgent Discoveries tab or somewhere around there.
You see, as a former fighter in the TFR Photoshop wars, Tony, I learned to keep a folder with all of these crazy Photoshops that I make, because from time to time here on TFR, to mix up the AI without us even knowing we were doing that at the time, we like to laugh at each other. So we make Photoshops of one another. There's some good ones, there's some bad. But yeah, I've got that kicking about, and I'll post your Patch Einstein condensate. Very apt for tonight, I think, Tony.
It is. And, I also want to mention here in chat, I'm glad that the pictures being posted here are cleaner than the ones posted in your chat room, Kev.
Yeah, that was rather disappointing. I must admit that, because I like to fill the chat up, and I know the audience like to get a bit rowdy, but we have to remember just to keep it slightly on the family side. I hope people don't mind, but absolutely. It's a far more intelligent lot you bring in tonight, Tony.
Well, we both bring them in. We entangle them, okay? So let's talk about 2011. 2011 is a very interesting year. This was brought up by my good friend Clyde Lewis last night on Ground Zero Radio. And I mentioned the Fukushima earthquake in 2011. And he brought up the fact that, the January 1 of 2011, a very odd number. 2011 also is when Strangelets were produced. And it is the first time that we saw it publicly acknowledged was in 2011. And we had the Fukushima event. And Fukushima is relevant to the discussion because, in my estimation, it was man-made, man-caused by HAARP. But without getting into that too deep, it's acknowledged that the rate of spin of the planet was increased. And by increasing the speed of the rotation of the planet, we reduced our time. Time was cut back. Time was actually reduced. Our time was slowed. And similar events that occurred in Chile and in Sumatra resulted in further slowing of the planet, or I should say slowing of time, speeding up the rotation of the planet. So we have perhaps 3 significant recorded instances of changing time. So in the case of Fukushima, the shortening of the length of the day was 1.8 microseconds. Okay? When we look at Chile reduced or caused time to shift by 1.26 microseconds. And then if we look at the Sumatran earthquake, which was a 9.1 in 2004, it was 6.8 microseconds. Now, I admittedly have not done any sophisticated calculations to determine what happens when you add up all these microseconds, what that means in terms of everyday life changing and time changing. But if the speed of the rotation of the planet is affected by, let me just say, mere earthquakes as isolated events, then what do you think, if you extrapolate, the effects would be of strangelets at the core of the planet, attracting material to itself, and thereby changing the speed of rotation of the core of the planet? And the core of the planet governs the rotation of the entire planet. So there does appear to be a shift in time that is occurring that we can attribute to both earthquakes and strangelets. Now, where I'm going with this is the Mandela effect. The Mandela effect I have labeled as quantum pollution, as a psychological operation due to the, as stated by Gordy Rose from D-Wave, accessing 2 to the 500th power of parallel dimensions. It's even more now, but extracting resources from those dimensions and bringing them into our reality. So we have not only some millisecond changes to our timeline, and thus our reality, from the planet itself and from strangelets, but we also have the quantum effects, the quantum pollution of information coming into our reality and changing our reality at the quantum scale. And because those resources, that information is coming into our reality, it is being utilized as a psychological operation known as the Mandela effect. That Mandela effect is, to be very specific, the information that was derived was mathematical information as to how to individually change the rate of spin of not the planet itself, but the spin of the quantum particles within our quantum computers, our literal brains. This is what an MRI machine does. It aligns protons to a specific direction. This is aligning the quantum particles of our minds based upon the mathematical formulas that were derived from parallel dimensions. This is Enochian language and communications we're talking about here, folks. Enochian communications that are facilitated by quantum computers, gaining vast amounts of mathematical information as to how to affect our minds. And on a physics level, they do that by changing the spin of quantum particles within our minds, changing the direction. More specifically, when you do that as a man-made quantum computer, when you change the spin, every time you modify the direction and the rate of spin of a quantum particle, you change it into either a 0 or a 1. You change its binary state. In the course of discussion of quantum computing and supersymmetry and superposition, we are actually changing the zeros to be simultaneously in the state of a 1, and the ones to simultaneously be in the state of being a 0. This is a four-way relationship. We're beyond binary. We're into quadnary, quantum quadnary, four-way representation of information. So just to back up a little bit, zeros and ones, if you change the spin of a single quantum particle, you're changing it to its state as being a 0 or a 1. And now in the case of quantum entanglement and superposition and supersymmetry, you're now able to have a simultaneous state of zeros and ones. What I'm getting at here by laying all that out in detail to you is that they are changing our minds by changing the spin of our minds. That is how you accomplish mind control. So, Kev, take it from there.
No, just for the listeners out there, because I always like to think that there's somebody brand new coming to this, Tony. And, you know, you're talking about these quantum effects there. And I'm sure most of the audience will have heard of Schrodinger's cat, and we covered this the other night as well. And Schrodinger's cat is the best way, I think, of getting around or trying to explain superposition. Wouldn't you think, Tony? Because this hypothetical cat that you've shut in a box and you can't see anymore, it becomes quantum. It is both theoretically dead and alive at the same time. Well, how can it hold two states at once? Well, that's because it's in superposition, because it is quantum. And that's that 1 and a 0, dead and alive at the same time. It's all about the state. And I have to ask you, Tony, I mean, when we're talking about ones and zeros in the tubulin dimers of our minds, our quantum brains, would that be akin to us having a conscious thought then, the changing of ones and zeros? And remember, they've mapped out basically every neural pathway. They can read our minds, Mark Zuckerberg has informed us. So they know exactly where to target, right?
Absolutely. They know how to target various portions of the brain. An MRI machine targets by utilizing a magnetic alignment vertically and horizontally. Because of the folds of the brain, you actually have to look at it not just from two planes, from vertical and horizontal, but you have to have the X, Y, and Z, the three-way looking at the brain. What I'm saying is that through an MRI machine, you're able to now map the pathways, and that's been accomplished. We mapped the human genome. Now we have mapped the pathways between the synapses, between the neurons, And we know what areas of the brain are controlling what aspects of our perception and our consciousness. And you are right. Consciousness is defined by the spin of the quantum particles. The directions and the speed at which they are spinning produces the binary information, which we know are the binary information is contained on tubulin dimers. These are pairs. These are warm and wet qubits, as I call them. These are biological qubits. D-Wave has matched 1 for 1 the number of qubits in a human neuron by utilizing their niobium and gold qubits that they have built to mimic the human brain. And then they arrange those qubits in the same pattern, the same math, the same mapping as the human brain, because they can't create something, but they can copy something. So they copy what God created in the human brain. So, yeah, go ahead, Kev. Consciousness is derived from at the quantum scale.
And, you know, Stuart Hameroff, and it was Rose, I think it was the mathematicians who basically came up with the idea of quantum consciousness. And they were kind of laughed at the beginning, weren't they, Tony? Because quantum effects in a wet and warm environment, usually quantum effects, folks, take place down at the very, very lowest temperatures. You look at D-Wave, they talk about the lowest end of the Kelvin scale. Now, the reason I bring that up is because when you get this wet and warm kind of environment, decoherence occurs. And Stuart Hameroff, in his presentation, he says that when these quantum effects start to happen, they basically don't last too long. If they did last a long time then, Tony, would that give birth to people being able to, how would you even put this, go to other dimensions? We hear of these yogis and things in the past that can bilocate and things like that. I mean, are they aligning their tubulin dimers in a certain 1 or a 0 configuration? That sounds crazy, right? But when you listen to the guy, Geordie Rose, talking about the technological, the artificial kind of substitute for what we've got in our brain, well, those qubits do exactly that. They go to other dimensions. So would our minds go there, Tony?
I think so, because if we consider and acknowledge our brains to be quantum computers, meaning that they process zeros and ones between quantum scale particles, thus defining it as a quantum computer, then there's no reason to say that the mind cannot access parallel dimensions, just as the D-Wave computer, openly admitted to by Geordie Rose, is accessing thousands of parallel dimensions for the purpose of processing. So let's define parallel dimensions and the accessing of that. That is nothing more than just the quantum entanglement to not identical particles. They can be different particles, but particles that are already in a state of communication. Now, with D-Wave, they communicate with parallel dimensions through quantum tunneling. Now, that's an energy state, and I'm not going to get into all that, but it's basically, if you look at a oscilloscope and you see a graph that comes up like a mountain, it has a peak, and then at the bottom, you're actually tunneling through the base of that mountain. And that gets into highest state and lowest state of energy and quantum annealing, and it isn't worth discussing. The point here is that they are accessing parallel dimensions by quantum tunneling, which means that they are accessing particles that are already in a state of linking up. They're already connected, and all they're doing is stimulating that other particle that you're connected with. Picture it this way. We're standing on one side of a door. You knock on that door. There's a person on the other side of the door that knocks back. That's quantum entanglement. That's communicating with a parallel dimension, which is on the other side of that door. And this is what CERN wants to do, is to now open that door. So you don't have to use quantum tunneling. You don't have a barrier or a veil. D-Wave is already doing that at the quantum scale using qubits, but that's a very, very small scale. What CERN wants to do is go to the macro scale and open that door. Well, I'll tell you, these guys in chat are amazing. They're so fast with the pictures. Thank you, Michael. That's a great picture. So what we're talking about here is literally communicating with parallel dimensions using a computer. But we do the same thing with our own brains. Now, I'm not a new ager. I know people sometimes make comments towards me that I speak like I'm a new age person. You've got to understand, and I'm taking a little sidetrack here. When the New Agers describe out-of-body experiences and traveling the cosmos in their minds, and they talk about sacred math and sacred geometry, they are bastardizing God's creation. They're copying God's creation. They're using God's creation and structure of the universe, and the whole discussion of out-of-body experiences is quantum entanglement. Okay? So it sounds like New Age that I'm talking about. In fact, it is very much New Agey. But understand, the New Age practitioners stole it from the creator of all of this. All I'm doing is spinning it 180 degrees back around to the point of origin and saying, no, you don't get to keep it, you New Age guys. You don't get to use it for controlling people, for pulling people into the hive mentality. You don't get to use it for controlling everyone like a serf class worker bee. No, you don't get to do that, because you are destroying New Agers' independent thought and critical thinking, and you're taking people away from the Creator, from God. They're distracting people and deceiving people. Now, I'm getting way off the discussion of quantum computers, our minds operating that way, but we do operate at the quantum scale all the time. And we do have that ability to communicate with parallel dimensions and have out-of-body experiences and travel the cosmos. That has nothing to do with New Age. This is the way God created our minds to function that way. And we always hear about dumbing down of people. Well, here you go. These are capabilities that we have been dumbed down through the environment and through, education systems and mass distractions out there, away from thinking, away from using our brains. And that's why I always keep talking about think critically, think independently. Don't let them control how you think. And then you can do all these things that the New Agers want to profess. But again, understand, the New Agers are all talking about the worship of Lucifer and controlling minds. Go ahead.
Well, before all this technology came along, Tony, if you go back to even Egypt, that kind of period then, it was cool to be into the information and knowledge and things like that. And this day and age that we're living in now, my child, he's always gonna have lived in a world where the internet is, Tony. And I look at it sometimes as, we're the most interconnected we've ever been, but it's the most separated we've ever been as well, because everyone's stuck in their rooms, they've got their head in their smart devices. And if you go back and look at these ancient times, they were sitting around, they were talking, they were sharing ideas, big ideas, changing the world. None of that is ever going to really happen again. None of that free thought.
Yeah, that's true. And Rebecca, you put this up in the chat room, and I thank you for that. I'm going to read this right off of your Gordy Rhodes. You'll find this on my website at anthonypatch.com. The shadow of these parallel worlds overlap with ours, and if we are smart enough, we can dive into them and grab their resources and pull them back into ours to make an effect on our world. This is Gordy Rose, one of the founders of D-Wave. So it sounds like I'm always beating up on D-Wave, but I'm just taking their own words and putting it out there as a reporter and saying, stop for a minute and look at what these guys are professing their abilities and capabilities to be. And to make an effect on our world, that is the psychological operation of the Mandela effect, affecting our perception that things have been changed in the physical world when in fact physically they have not been changed. Now, Kev, I want you to jump in here. I want you to take the quote from that Mandela website.
Oh, Tony, the entanglement is strong. I've got it dug up here. I thought, what a profound way. Give them the punchline right before the break. Because like I said, I think today we may have had some loose kind of confirmation that we have been on the money all along. And this comes from the woman called Fiona Broome. Now, Fiona Broome is regarded as being the person who coined the term the Mandela effect. And I'll just quickly read this out. It's only a short piece. Early in 2016, I deliberately stepped back from this website. Now, the website's mandelaeffect.com. Part of it was the crazy workload. Moderating comments required 5 to 6 hours per day, 7 days a week, and that's just too much. In addition, around April 2016, I was more or less asked to stop discussing the Mandela effect topic. Now, the general message that I was given was my articles and conversations might be influencing the outcome of experiments that were at a critical point. Now, even if those contacting me seemed credible and official, and I wasn't sure that they were, those requests sounded odd, illogical. Well, that is until you start factoring in that that's probably around the time period myself and Mr. Patch started pointing to the Mandela effect being a massive psychological operation. In her own words, Tony, the outcome of an experiment was reaching a critical point. Go figure.
Another smoking gun. It's amazing. This is happening so quickly and so rapidly between you and me. These confirmations that we've talked about all this time. It is amazing. It really is. And we're not just blowing our own horn here. We're just saying, look, this is all the truth that we've been speaking. And now it's being reinforced.
Wow, and just a quick shout out to Sarah in the chat room. Started her own YouTube channel to spread God's truth, as others work, as well as likes of mine and yours, Tony. That is brilliant, Sarah. That's what people need to be doing. Join us after the break.
Real people, real radio. Wherever you are, make it TFR. Truth Frequency Radio.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You're tuned in live to tonight's Anthony Patch Show, right here on Truth Frequency Radio Network. I want to thank all of you for tuning in, whether you're over on iHeartRadio, TalkStream Live, TuneIn Radio app, or right here on the home of the Anthony Patch Show at truthfrequencyradio.com. It's been an absolutely brilliant show tonight, and you heard a little taster there of our new intro music. It's fantastic, and just not enough of it. So myself and Tony, we are going to play the full track, and this is Strangelets by Robbie Spencer. Now, he was obviously inspired by the great work of Anthony Patch. I want you all to sit back, kick back, and shake out a little bit of Strangelets. Enjoy.
They got the head of Osiris at the Vatican. In September they'll bring him back to life again. It's true. What will we all do? Strangelet, CERN is on top of it. Now they separate the corpse and open up the gate to another dimension where we'll meet our fate. Ooh, what will we all do? Strangelets, dark matter is what you get. Quantum computing is reality. T and D-Wave Systems now holds the keys to hell. I think the world just fell. Strangelet, demons are what you get. When a wave starts running on the 8th of May, they will ramp up the power to 1 PV. It's true, 1 PV, that's right. What will we all do? Strangelet, Sir knows just what we'll get. Come on, Eric, give him what you got. Eric Ladinsky on lead guitar. That's right. Elon Musk on bass. Come on now. We got Jordy Rhodes on the drums. We are the Tetrahedron Blues Band. Hey, you guys have been a great audience. We'll see y'all in hell. Anthony Patch is the man in the know. And the powers that be don't want him to go. Whoa. On the Kev Baker Show.
You're listening to Truth Frequency Radio.
Strangelet, blue ones are what you get. Strangelet.
Absolutely fantastic. And that's one of our listeners, Robbie Spencer with Strangelets. Tony, I love that. And, you know, D-Wave with the keys to the gates of hell or whatever it is. And then Elon Musk on bass, Rose on drums. Just classic. And, you know, talking of our favourite genius, lunatic, billionaire that we love to cover so much, Mr. Elon Musk. Now, we cracked a joke before we went out to one of the breaks where we said we were going to go and meet with Elon over at the LHC at CERN in Geneva, Switzerland. Now, the reason we are going to do silly little things like that from time to time, because we're not really meeting up with Elon, is we know that the D-Wave is listening, right? So we're going to take every opportunity we get to confuse it. And I can't think of a better way than throwing away kind of comments like that. Like we were joking before the show, there'll be alarm bells going off at the NSA over at GCHQ. The quantum AI will be going berserk right now. And before we get back into all the research that you've been doing for tonight's show, just on a total side note, I came to the computer today and, you know, I love Elon Musk. I don't hide my love for him. But at the same time, I also worry about him. He's got a dark soul, that one, in some places. But he has featured in another TED Talk. And it's really great to sit and listen to him when he sits down and speaks at length, because he really is a genius, and you can see how his mind works. But one interesting part that almost had me choking on my coffee, and I was chuckling when he was talking about it, was these new gigafactories that he's going to be working on. Now, I'm just going to play a little short clip here in which Elon's asked about these factories, and then he goes on to, well, explain just what it's like. Take a listen to this.
These houses is the falling price of lithium-ion batteries, which you've made a huge bet on as Tesla. In many ways, that's almost the core competency, and you've decided that to really own that competency, you just have to build the world's largest manufacturing plant and kind of double the world's supply of lithium-ion batteries.
Yeah.
Is with this guy. What is this?
Yeah, so that's the Gigafactory. The progress so far in the Gigafactory. Eventually, you can sort of roughly see that there's sort of a diamond shape overall, and when it's fully done, it'll look like a giant diamond, or that's the idea behind it. And it's aligned on true north. There's a small detail there.
Oh, Elon Musk. So he's building a factory, Tony, a giant factory in the desert that is only going to be shaped like a diamond. And just a little note, it's aligned to true north.
Just a little note. Just a little note.
No, just a little note.
All right, all you guys that are into sacred geometry, all you guys that are into astrology, all you guys that are into paying attention to the cosmos, let that ring a bell in your head. Aligning a large concentration of magnetic and electrical energy in one place and aligned to our magnetic north. Now, we may do a show on that a little bit later, Kev. I think we can get into that a little bit deeper. When I talked about MRI machines aligning protons into one direction in order to create an image, when I talk about changing the spin of our quantum particles in our brains in order to control our minds. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but Elon is going to be building more of these around the planet, is he not?
Oh, he certainly is, and he's quite specific because, in fact, I'll play it on Tony because it's quite interesting how specific he is. Take a listen to this.
And capable of producing like 100, eventually like 100 gigawatt hours of batteries a year.
100 gigawatt hours. We think probably more, but yeah.
And they're actually being produced right now already here, right?
They're in production already.
You guys put out this video.
Yeah.
I mean, is that speeded up or?
That's the slowed down version.
So how fast does it actually go?
Well, when it's running at full speed, you can't actually see the cells without a strobe light. It's just blur.
And I mean, one of your core ideas, Elon, about what makes an exciting future is a future where we no longer feel guilty about energy. Help us picture this. I mean, how many gigafactories, if you like, does it take to get us there?
It's about 100, roughly. It's not 10, it's not 1,000, most likely 100.
So it's 100, and these things come at a whopping $1 billion a pop. Now, later this year, he is set to announce another 2 of these factories. Now, Tony, we were kind of having a little laugh and some speculation before the show, but what's the betting that when we look at these 100 locations that he has earmarked, and these first 2 that he comes out with this year will be a big indication, but I'm thinking, just as you are, probably ley lines, wouldn't you think?
Yes, these are nodes. They are going to link these up. I am going to tell you the conclusion that came to my mind as I was listening to that clip again. I think that's the 3rd time you've played it for me. I was thinking Nazi Bell.
Oh.
Okay, he's talking about these things spinning so quickly you have to have a laser, a strobe light, in order to see it moving. Nazi Bell internally had red mercury spinning in opposite directions driven by high current, high power, high voltage DC current, which is exactly what happens at CERN with the oppositely opposing near light speed accelerated particles moving as a larger version of the Nazi Bell. Rather than red mercury, we're talking protons and ions of lead and that sort of thing. Now, he's talking about spinning at high speed. This is the same thing that the Nazi Bell and particle accelerators, ring-based accelerators, do. Now, the number 100 is also significant, but I won't go into that right now. What I'm getting at here is they're going to be linking up these high-speed rotational electromagnetic systems. Yes, they're talking about batteries. But you're storing energy, electromagnetic energy. These will set up electromagnetic lines of force. Just like the main ring of the Large Hadron Collider produces at right angles, orthogonal to the ring, lines of magnetic force. So they are setting up new ley lines These will all be interconnected. This can absolutely change the spin of the planet itself and perhaps the trajectory, the orbit of the planet itself. So that's something to chew on.
And you know, I've got a story here, and it's all about trajectory, spin, orientation of the planet. And it's just a kind of addendum to what we were talking about with the earthquakes before, Tony, and the Earth shifting, because a story on the 14th of January 2011 from the Daily Mail, and I remember covering this at the time back on YouTube in the early days. The sun rises 2 days early in Greenland, sparking fears that climate change is accelerating. So just think of that. The sun, it actually rose on 2 days early, 2 days ahead of time. The usual date is the 13th of January, but this time it came up on the 11th. Now that suggests to me, Tony, a big shift.
Yeah, I agree with you there. It's, I don't know. This is actually, in my mind, kind of ringing rather ominously. I think you've just hit on something that is extremely important to us because we talk about terraforming the planet through what happens with activities at CERN. I pardon the pun, I'm quite concerned. I really think you and I need, and I'm enlisting our audience, and especially those folks in chat, to do some digging and find out, if you can, the locations, the proposed locations for each of these gigafactories. The thing that stands out for me here is not only the spin of these and the locations of them, but if you'll recall, when we talk about the energy that is produced through collisions in colliders, we talk about giga electron volts, tera electron volts, peta-electron volts. It is not a coincidence that he is producing power and using a name called giga. These are all interrelated. The timing of this is very suspicious to me.
And you know, we flip this 180 because, like we were saying before the show, some people may say we're doom and gloom. And with my fanboy effect that I have with Elon, let's play devil's advocate, because he's obviously in the know. He's in with all these billionaire cats. He knows if there's anything going down. Maybe, just maybe, he's actually trying to alleviate something they've done in the past. Maybe he's trying to help us out, Tony. I know I'm probably giving him too much slack here, right? But there's always two ways of looking at things.
Well, I'm willing to 180 this. And let's say maybe they're trying to change the orbit of the planet, the trajectory, because of Planet X. What do you think?
Now, Planet X, we had Caltech coming out at the start of last year announcing that they had found Planet 10, or Planet 9, sorry. It's a topic that doesn't go away, Tony. And, you know, I get a lot of hate for this. Not a lot of hate, but maybe some people think I'm quite cheeky. I don't know. But I would imagine if we do have a planetary body on the way in, we would know about it from the astronomers, the amateur astronomers, a long, long time before people are going to be able to take photographs of it on their iPhones, wouldn't you think?
I think so, and I think also in terms of the electrical connections that exist between all the planets and thereby the stars themselves, we are in a plasma envelope. We are in a plasma conductive medium. We are in a medium of ionized gas. This is what Tesla referred to as the ether. And again, we have quite a large audience today. I've been looking at the numbers, so I'm kind of going back a little bit into some of the preliminary things that we've laid out for our audience in the past. But the point here is that I think that if there was a Planet X that was approaching or even entering our solar system, because of the electromagnetic attraction between planetary bodies, asteroids, comets, I think we would already be experiencing quite a bit more terraforming effects upon this planet, a lot more earthquakes specifically.
And I think we would see something in the outer planets first as well, depending what way it comes in, Tony. I don't trust NASA, not one jot. However, I do trust amateur astronomers who haven't got a kind of dog in the fight. They don't have funding to worry about. Lots of good pictures in the chat room of double sun effects. But again, though, I would point people to go and check out the YouTube channel called Daza, the Cameraman. Now, this guy, he is an absolute boffin. What Anthony Patch is to CERN, this guy is to digital anomalies, and he will go and recreate all of the effects that you see. And he doesn't do it to debunk people. He does it for information and to take fear away. It's really great. We've had Daza on the show before, Tony, but a lot of these images and pictures that we do see, they can create unnecessary fear and hype.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I can appreciate the fact that, we are experiencing the chemtrails, and that can be covering up, what may be going on in the solar system that amateur astronomers are not able to penetrate through the chemtrails and see what really is going on. And there could be, the double suns, there could be the approach of Planet X. But I agree with you. There have been things in terms of Venus and other planets that have had some experiences that people have assigned to the approach of Planet X. But I really believe that there would be some not only increases in volcanic activity, which we do see plenty of unusual numbers and intensities of volcanoes happening, and a certain ramp up to earthquakes as well.
And Tony, to Star in the chat room, the brilliant Star, she was saying there that the planets are experiencing atmospheric changes now. I actually put that down to the fact that we're probably still coming out the tail end of the galactic center. Now, during the 2012 kind of hype that all kicked up, what I came to learn was, when I was researching, it was an important time astrologically because we were literally traversing from one hemisphere of our Milky Way into the other. We were going from the north to the south, I believe, irrelevant. But I think possibly the atmospheric changes, that could be to do with the particles, the energy in space, could it not, Tony? The actual area that we're traveling through right now.
Yeah, and I think that there is quite a bit that we need to pay attention to in terms of our relative position to the center of the galaxy. And in fact, that's what D-Wave has done. When we talked about a long time ago that D-Wave had tuned, as I said, tuned the operating frequency of their computers to the background microwave radiation, to the frequency and wavelength of the background microwave radiation coming from the center. So I think that we can say that not only is it tuned to it, but it's tracking our movement past the center. And there is an awful lot of debris that the planet is going to encounter, and I think we're coming out of some on the other side of it as well behind us. Now, I just want to stop real quick because in the chat room, Mr. Nobody has posted a very good breakdown. This is great research, a breakdown of some of the potential locations for these gigafactories. And Kev, do you have a way to screen capture that, or if Mr. Nobody can send us a link to this information?
I've got it, Tony. I'll send you it right now here on Skype.
All right.
That is absolutely fantastic, mister. And this is why, honestly, you lot out there in the chat room, you contribute so much to the show. You probably don't appreciate the fact that even just your energy out there, we can feed off that, Tony. And then you get little nuggets like this. It's just fantastic.
It is. It's beautiful. And now there's a new picture that's up here that has the tetrahedrons surrounding the planet. If you look at the ley lines on the planet, the magnetic ley lines, they are laid out as tetrahedrons around the planet. And the reason for that is because the planet itself, like all the other planets and the stars, including our sun, are comprised of tetrahedrons. And that's why my model of the universe is a 600-cell tetrahedron, indicating...
Sorry, Tony. Quick thought, though. We look at today, we hear Tesla putting these gigafactories around. We're speculating as to the ley lines. Is this similar to what the Egyptians may have been doing with their machines on the ley lines back in the day? And I know that sounds outrageous, right?
No, not really. I think that if you want to consider the number of pyramids that we're still uncovering underwater and also, in the earth itself, digging out pyramids all around the planet, I think that Elon Musk is producing a modern version of the pyramids.
If anyone's going to do it, it's going to be Musk, isn't it? I mean, we've got a couple of minutes before we go to break. He's on about his tunneling machines in that video. I'll drop it in the chat room. I'll include it in the show notes. I urge everyone to go and listen to how Elon Musk's head works, but we should really pester him to come on the show, Tony. I mean, we give him enough name checks after all, right?
Well, yeah, and Gordy Rose and Eric Ledezinski from D-Wave, I think these guys should come on our show, and I challenge them to come on the show with a welcome, not a challenge, with a welcome. We would open our arms to them to come on this show and discuss with us the concerns that we have about what they're doing. Now, that's a challenge, but it is also, it's not tongue-in-cheek. We're not being flippant here. Yeah, we're playing games with the AI, but I know that the guys at CERN, I know the guys at D-Wave listen. I know the two guys that visited me at the second Ground Zero University with Clyde Lewis.
What was the date of that, Tony? When did that occur? Can you remember when that was?
Yeah, I think it was June of 15. June
of 15, so about 9 months before the lady that talked Mandela effect got the visit. I was just doing the math.
No, that's okay. But, I'm confident that the two gentlemen I met were not from an alphabet agency. I believe they were from D-Wave. But it's not that we're fearful of D-Wave and the people that are there or the people at CERN. They're just human beings like the rest of us. They're just, unfortunately, they've been lied to. They've been deceived. And I pray for their souls. I pray for their well-being. I have nothing personally against them. I would welcome an opportunity. And maybe, Kev, it would be totally appropriate to be in neutral Switzerland, in Geneva, with those three gentlemen, and at CERN specifically. So let's throw the invitation wide. We would like to be invited. All expenses paid, by the way, because we are just paupers, you and me. CERN should pay our way, or Elon can cut the check. He's got the money. And we go to CERN, and we have a conversation with CERN, Elon, Gordy, and Eric. Now, that would be a monumental event in the truth community.
But Tony, didn't we do that already? Remember that night? All of us shoved on the cloaks and we went out in front of Trevor. Oh, no, I wasn't meant to say that on air. I thought we were on
we did the ritual. It
was now the AI really is confused. Listen, folks, we've got one segment to go, but don't forget, this is like a truth marathon here on TFR tonight. Freaky Friday, Beyond the Veil, Paranormal Portal, and so much more. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Real people, real radio.
Initiating the truth frequency.
This is Truth Frequency Radio.
Okay, that music was from my good friend Paul Harper that I mentioned. That's Spirit House. And I apologize to Paul that the other outros were a little quiet. We put this together very quickly just overnight. So we'll get it better for the next show. But that was Spirit House by Paul Harper. And I appreciate he and Robbie contributing today. This has really made the show so much better than that corny music that I've been complaining about for, 14 or 15 shows now. So we finally got that together. Now, Kev was asking chat room about the sound level on his mic because he was just booming through my headset here.
Well, it turns out, Tony, that they think it's just fine out there. So I think it might be your headset. I'm not sure.
Well, I think they're trying to change the spin of my quantum particles in my quantum computer because I kid you not, I opened up my speaker slider on my computer, and as Paul's music was playing, my slider was moving left and right all by itself.
Oh, this is what happened. This is what happened to Johnny Whistles as well. His audio slider started moving itself. So I'm not sure, but always make sure you've got the little box checked so that it doesn't automatically adjust. Maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, I think it's Elon Musk playing games with
I
us.
think so. It's probably because we've been so blasé about calling him out tonight.
Now, I am remiss. I'm going to make an apology to my chat room group here, our chat room group. You guys are invited to Geneva with us. How's that? You come with us. We need our chat room army. We need our special Black Ops guys. We need our special forces. That would be fun. We could all show up at Geneva together. What do you think, guys? So,
a rapid Wookiee reaction force. It sounds absolutely fabulous.
Wookiee reaction force. I like that.
WRF. So, Tony, what are we going to get into for the last segment tonight? It's just gone so fast, so quickly. Unbelievable.
It does. We've got so much to cover, and it's like trying to sort it out and put it together so it's cohesive for the listening audience. We're going to go from Wookiees to wimps. Now, I was invited on to the Hagman show, whom I respect. I respect the Hagmans, Joe and Doug. And about a year ago, I was invited on, and one of their frequent contributors, frequent guests, is Stan Deo. And Stan Deo was nice enough to do the intro for my latest book. He did the foreword for Revising Reality. Stan Deo is a great researcher. He's got a lot more knowledge than I do. He's forgotten more than I probably will ever learn. But when Stan first met me on the Hagman show for the first time, his first words were, "So how are the wimps tonight?" That's WIMPS. How are the wimps tonight? And I immediately said, "Oh, you mean the weakly interacting massive particles?" And that threw him off guard. That threw him off his pace there, because I think he was testing me. Now, Kev, I've talked about the litmus test before with you privately, and that was his litmus test to see if I knew anything about physics, and I threw it right back at him. So weakly interacting massive particles, known as WIMPs, are the theorized particles that comprise dark matter and dark energy, both of which have never been measured, never been empirically, experimentally reproduced in the laboratory. Therefore, dark matter and dark energy does not exist. And again, that's Einstein's gravity model of the universe. And Kev and I have always been promoting the Tesla model of the universe, which is the electric model. And we always give a tip of the hat to the researchers at the Thunderbolts Project, who really have broken ground on this whole electric model of the universe. So I'm going to offer you this. Our listening audience, I believe the narrative coming out of CERN is about to shift. I believe they are going to distance themselves from weakly interacting massive particles, WIMPs, and dark matter and dark energy. I think they are going to come out and say the correct model, the possible model that explains dark energy and dark matter, which they probably will never really get away from talking about that because it's so entrenched in the world of particle physics. I think they will explain dark matter and dark energy in terms of strangelets, quark gluon condensate, or quark gluon plasma, as they specifically cite it. Because now they are employing a plasma-based device, a Tesla device, known as Awake, the linear accelerator. And on Monday the 8th, Kev and I will be doing on his show, the Kev Baker Show, a special show talking about Awake. We'll break it all down. We'll explain all of the mechanisms of it and what their goal, what their reason, the implications for conjoining the merging of the linear accelerator Awake with the large main ring of the Large Hadron Collider. But last week, CERN acknowledged for the first time to the public in no uncertain terms, they were very clear, that they were acknowledging that they have been producing quark-gluon plasma. They didn't call it strangelets, but they openly acknowledged it for the first time and confirmed the smoking gun that Kevin and I have been professing for a number of years now, that they were producing strangelets. That's why we started the show talking about strangelets. So to summarize, and Kev, you can come back in here, is they're going to change the narrative from talking about WIMPs as the probable makeup of dark matter, dark energy, and shift to the plasma, shift to the quark-gluon plasma condensate that they openly acknowledged. And they will start saying this QGP, quark-gluon plasma, is what they will say they have discovered, and they have empirically confirmed that that makes up dark matter and dark energy, because they have to, at some point, say that they have been right all along about dark matter and dark energy. They will never let that bone go.
And of course, just as myself and Mr. Patch work, he mentioned he was going to go into this during the break, and it made me recall a story that I had seen during my looking for stories, as I do every night. And it was a couple of weeks ago, and it's the Express here, and it's across a lot of different publications. It says, mysteries of the universe deepen as scientists say that dark energy is not even real. Scientists may have drastically altered our understanding of the universe after a group of researchers claimed that dark energy may not exist. Now, what they've actually done is, to cut a long story short, they made up 2 models of the universe on their computers. They don't say what computer they've got, but they made the models, one containing dark energy or dark matter and one containing normal matter. Now, they found that both of these 2 simulated universes both pretty much worked the same. And that gave rise to the idea that dark energy isn't actually needed at all. It says by constructing computer simulations that compare a standard cosmological model with one that only had dark matter, which is equally mysterious and accounts for all the unseen matter in the universe, and one with normal matter, they found that they both act very similarly, suggesting that there is no need at all for dark energy. So this could be the start of them moving towards what Tony's saying. They'll drip, drip, drip. They'll prepare us. It'll be a slow process at first, but then the big eureka moment will come along, and it'll be as if we've always known that anyway, Tony, right?
Yeah, you and I've known it all along. And again, I thank the guys at Thunderbolts Project for really opening my eyes up to the model, the real model of the universe, which is the electric model. And, you know, I've always been a fan of Tesla's work. And I've always been a fan of Buckminster Fuller's work. People know him from the geodesic dome. If you really start to look at those 2 researchers, you really see how one, in the form of, I think Tesla is providing the energy of the universe, a understanding of the energy component to it. And then Buckminster Fuller giving us the structure, the geometry of it. And I think that's a good way to look at those 2. Is one is talking about the construct of the universe, and the other is talking about the energy, the functioning of the universe. So I encourage people to take a look at those 2. And not many people are really looking at what Buckminster Fuller presented in his numerous papers and books and in his research, but he really covered quite a few different areas in science. He was very much a multidisciplinarian. A Renaissance man, as he's often been described. So that's a good area for people to go take a look at if they haven't really done it before. So I agree with you, Kev. I think we're moving away from this whole discussion of dark matter and dark energy, and they're going to get right into the plasma of everything.
Do you think they will ever come out, Tony, and admit that they've been wrong and that is an electric universe, or will that just be, it will be unsaid? They'll just talk about plasma and stuff like that, but they won't fully do away with the Einstein model, right?
No, they'll never get away from the Einstein model. And I think a good way to look at that is the fact that in popular culture right now, we are seeing on the National Geographic Channel this series about Einstein. And so again, like the physicists of today that I mentioned at the outset of the show that are held up as these celebrities, obviously they're making Einstein out to be a celebrity. However, you don't see an equal presentation in terms of a miniseries about Tesla. They don't want to hold him up as a celebrity.
A very good point. You know, Christine in the chat, a great shout. Tony, can you possibly interview one of the Thunderbolts project guys? Imagine that. That would be great to get one of them on here, Tony. The conversation you could have with them. Wow.
Well, I did have lunch one time with Dave Talbot, and he is one of the founders of the Thunderbolts project, and I do have a connection with him. There's every reason to believe that that could happen. He does a lot of interviews, primarily in the scientific circles. I think in this circle, we probably could encourage him to come on the show. I think that there is a massive audience here on TFR, and I think, yeah, Christine, I think it's a fabulous idea, and I have a personal contact with him that I can exercise, so that would be fun. That would be fun to do.
And of course, if there's anything out there, the listeners have any ideas, anything like that at all, Tony, you can get in touch with him via the website. I'm always available as well, and we welcome all of the links and the input, don't we?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we always want to communicate back and forth as much as we can, and I appreciate a number of people in chat that are emailing back and forth with me. But even here in the chat room, we try to be interactive as much as we can be. I do want to acknowledge Jack Linden. He's been talking about a couple of things in chat here, and I just want to clarify Awake, because on Monday, as I said, we're going to do a whole show about Awake. But Awake is a plasma wake field accelerator, and it is not necessarily strangelets. I agree with you, Jack. It is not necessarily a quark gluon plasma, but we are talking about plasma, ionized gas. And so there is a bit of a crossover there, but we're not talking about them plugging strangelets into Awake. But I'm going to qualify that statement, because I have said in the past, just in the last couple of weeks, that the pre-accelerated particles that are coming from one stream, one beam of the main ring of the LHC, those will be protons, electrons, photons, whatever they choose to use. But primarily, we're focusing on electrons at this point being accelerated. Those are pre-accelerated and then fed into, much like a rifle breech, into the Awake, which only has a 10-meter-long chamber containing the plasma. And it is set in a 30-meter-long architecture. That said, there's no reason, once they've calibrated using protons, electrons, photons, that they cannot take strangelets themselves. Remember, I said at the beginning of the show, you can't contain strangelets, but you can magnetically direct them. You can steer them. And this is exactly what happens in the main ring. Now, I'm not saying that they're necessarily going to feed into the main ring strangelets. Rather, they will produce them specifically in the Alice detector, which is where they've been producing them and detecting them. And you said earlier that they, 5 years ago and 10 years ago, we said at the beginning of the show, I don't think maybe you caught it, Jack, but at the beginning of the show, Kev and I came up with information today that shows as far back as 1980, this discussion of the quark gluon plasma began. And that possibly in 1990, they had their first detection. And then all the way on up into 2015, when Brookhaven really made the big announcement. And then about 2 weeks ago, CERN made their definitive announcement about producing in the Alice detector, where the particles collide, the quark gluon plasma. So here's how I see it playing out later this year. From Alice, the strangelets will then be fed from the main ring, just like they're doing during the calibration runs that are starting on Monday. They will be feeding the strangelets into the linear accelerator for the purpose of, and I've said this many times, the employment of strangelets to break the nuclear strong force that binds quarks together, direct that from the linear accelerator to the north area, the center point of the main ring. That's called the north area impact point. That is where the tearing of the veil, the separating of quarks, the use of 20 peta-electron volts of energy, utilizing strangelets, which is the most powerful explosive in the known universe. This is why they're producing strangelets. They need that to tear the veil. So I hope that helps to explain a little bit further what the whole picture is there, Jack. And I'm not coming down on you. I appreciate what you said. I'm just trying to clarify my position as to how I see it playing out. So and go ahead, Kev.
Yeah, Monday night is going to be a massive show yet again right here on TFR, because on the Kev Baker show, myself and Johnny will welcome Mr. Anthony Patch on there, and we will be having an Awake special. Now, the Awake experiment itself, Tony probably picked up on this. I actually love the science behind it. I think it's uber cool, and it really does open up a world where we could shrink these particle accelerators and all the good stuff that comes with them to the size of something that will fit on a desktop in a doctor's surgery. And when we get away from the nasty side of what the elites want to use these things for, Tony, I mean, it could be game-changing having these particle accelerators accessible in labs and surgeries, like I say.
Yeah, we mentioned on your show the chip-based linear accelerators that were produced at Stanford utilizing the SLAC, the Stanford Linear Accelerator. So that essentially is the direction that things are headed, is to reduce these in size so they can literally be chip-sized, tabletop-sized linear accelerators. And we often joked about, don't cross the streams from the Ghostbusters, and that those were particle accelerators that were unlicensed, as Dan Aykroyd said, or the other character. Anyway, the point is, these things don't have to be massive. If you go back to the history of synchrotron particle accelerators, go back to Berkeley, the first ring-based or circular-based accelerator was actually handheld. You could hold it in two hands, and they were built from just literally scrap materials. And then by building larger magnets, they were able to increase the size of the rings. And in fact, at Berkeley, it's a smaller version of CERN in their Advanced Light Source Building, which is a synchrotron particle accelerator. So both the ring-based and the linear can be scaled down and scaled up, depending on how much power you want to realize from these. And thank you, Rebecca, for putting up the chip-sized linear accelerator on a chip. You can literally hold them on your finger. And that's where the technology is headed. So Awake is a big hammer. They want to employ that, as I said, with strangelets. And, strangelets are produced from a number, and again, I'm going back to Jack, what he was saying in there, is they can be produced from lead-to-lead, ions of lead collisions. They can be produced from protons and lead. They can be produced from anything that has a yield that is at least, and this is something we didn't bring up yet, Kev, but we talked about going back in time as to when they were detecting or theorizing or producing strangelets, but it's the power level. The Brookhaven lab made it sound in 2015 in their August paper that you had to achieve a threshold of 10 tera-electron volts in order to produce strangelets, whether you're talking about ions of lead or protons and lead, or protons and gold, or lead and gold. And that's a whole nother discussion, is lead and gold collisions. But the point here is the threshold of 10 TeV that they were putting out from Brookhaven is not accurate, because you and I both came up with the information that as low as 4 tera-electron volts in lead-to-lead or even in proton-to-lead collisions, you can produce the quark-gluon condensate.
It was even more startling than that, because they achieved their 4 tera-electron volts using lead and gold. Back to the gold, Tony. Always in there. And like I said to you, if you know what you're reading, you can tell what they're talking about is alchemy. And alchemy takes us back to John Dee. And Anthony Patch is the guy who's tied John Dee into all of this. Why? Because it's all about the Enochian mathematics that he was playing about with, but didn't have the math, didn't have the tech. Only we have the math, the geometry, and the tech now, Tony. And that's why we're in these days now.
It really is. And thank you for bringing that up, because this is through D-Wave, just to kind of wrap up the show. D-Wave is communicating just like John Dee and Edward Kelly did with fallen angels, and they're obtaining the forbidden knowledge that we're really not supposed to be privy to. And this takes the form of mathematics and also a written language, a spoken language, an alphabet. D-Wave is Kelly and Dee on steroids, if you will. And that is applied to the technology at CERN. The layout of the Large Hadron Collider, the main ring, is laid out the same way that Crowley did in his practice of Enochian communication. Laid out the circle with the 4 cardinal points represented as the watchtowers that Crowley was representing. And this is what Kelly had produced. Kelly had produced this idea of the watchtowers in a circle, in a ring. This is why the synchrotron particle accelerator is a ring, and why the 4 main detectors are at the 4 compass points, the cardinal points of the ring. This is all ritual. This is all mystical applications. And when you talk about colliding particles of ions, specifically of lead and gold together, you immediately, when you're in this discussion of Dee and Kelly and Crowley, you're talking about the transmutation of materials, changing lead into gold. The way you do that, and we only have 2 minutes left, but the way you do that is you get the mathematical equation from the other side as to how to arrange quantum particles in a specific geometric shape. If you rearrange the quantum particles into a specific shape, you now have a specific element. If you take the geometry of lead at the quantum scale and you rearrange, you use the mathematical equations, if you rearrange the geometric shape of lead into the geometric shape of gold, that's the transmutation that takes place. This is why CERN breaks down quantum particles as they do, is to obtain the mathematical construct, the geometry of quantum particles. And we'll talk about that maybe on Monday, because we only have about a minute left. But that's the short version of why they collide particles together. It's all about the geometry of quantum particles. Go ahead, Kev.
Tony, almost out of time, but what a show, man. Absolutely off the charts. The listeners, the chat room is filled to the gunnels. This has been absolutely amazing. You know, probably people will need to listen to this again. I'll do what I do with your show now, Tony. I'll put some visuals to this as well to help it really sink in for people. And I can't thank you enough for bringing all of this to our attention, Tony. It really is. And I can't wait to see what else we can uncover as the weeks and the shows progress, because I think we have got big revelations ahead still to come.
Yeah, as Johnny Whistles always says, he says, you know, I just can't believe the stuff that you and I dig up from week to week. There's always something new, always something new. So I appreciate everybody tuning in today. Thank you, and Rebecca, for the full armor of God. Absolutely. Everybody needs to put on the full armor of God. No fear, and make it TFR, and stand by for the crazy guys on Freaky Friday. God bless you all. Lewis last night on Ground Zero University, or Ground Zero show, as you said. And we started, you and I, today looking deeper into when did they first identify strangelets. Now, I'm going to make it really short because we're going to backfill this, but the punchline is, as far back as the 1980s, they were theorizing that they would be able to produce strangelets. And it appears that perhaps in the 90s they did, and then they had to get some confirmation of that, and it progressed on into, 2010 and 2015 and so forth. The point is, CERN for years has tried to deny the fact that they're producing strangelets, which is a quark gluon condensate, the most powerful explosive in the known universe. You can't contain it because it's so heavy, and it plummets to the core of the planet. It is a stable material, whereas all other material of the planet is unstable. Therefore, the planet is attracted by the strangelets towards the core. This is how a neutron star is formed. Now, CERN has tried to deny for the last several years that they were producing strangelets. It now appears that since they started in 1998 with the Large Hadron Collider itself, that they have been producing these, and that other laboratories like Brookhaven and other laboratories have been producing perhaps as long as 1990. Now, what does that mean? It means that if they've been producing strangelets all this time, and they've been plummeting to the core of the planet has been undergoing a steady increase in the terraforming of the planet. Now, it doesn't mean that this is going to cause Earth to change in the next couple of years or even in the next 100 years into a neutron star. It all depends on how much material is gathering at the core of the planet. But this is what I call the cousin to the black hole, only because this is a collapsing. This is an attraction, not through gravity. This is not a gravimetric attraction of material in the collapsing. Composed a piece called Spirit House, Haus. So we're going to have some new music today. We've got a lot to cover. Last time on Kev's show, Wednesday, we were talking about mind control and how quantum entangled brains literally are affected by changing the spin of quantum particles within our brains. But without getting into that at the beginning, we really have to jump into what Kev and I fell into today. We got caught up in the rabbit holes of strangelets, and I think you're going to enjoy where we went with this. Go ahead, Kev.
And this all kind of came about because you were over with our mutual friend last night, Clyde Lewis, over on Ground Zero. And you were on there talking about the Mandela effects again, Tony. You just can't get away from these things. And then the conversation shifted to the strangelets. Now, I heard you talking about the strangelets there. We shared a couple of emails this morning. And we were the ones that broke on the show here that strangelet production was occurring at 10 tera electron volts. Now, for new listeners out there, if you're wondering what a strangelet is, Tony will give you the hard physics in a moment, but if you just imagine the most explosive and the most attractive kind of substance in the universe, and this was about momentarily after what some people call the Big Bang, let's just call it the singularity on this show. So in the immediate milliseconds, if we can even call it time, after the singularity started expanding outwards, these strangelets, Tony, they were present, right? And like I said, we at the time last year on the show, we were saying strangelets, they get produced at 10 tera electron volts. And CERN were achieving that, weren't they?
Yeah, they were. We had been talking for the last couple of years about also, in addition to CERN, the Relativistic Heavy Ion Collider, the RHIC at Brookhaven Laboratory in New York, that they had announced in 2015 that they had produced strangelets, and then CERN followed after that. But the thing that we came into, this started with Clyde Lewis.
Anthony Patch is the man in the know, and the powers that be don't want him to go. Whoa. On the Kev Baker Show,
You're listening to Truth Frequency Radio.
Strangelets, blue ones are what you get. Strangelets, 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 demons are what you get.
Kev, are you there?
Tony, are you there?
Hello.
You were
Are
bringing.
we entangled? Are we entangled?
Will we establish entanglement now? You see, we didn't decide who was bringing us in this week, Tony. Too much hilarity before the show. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another Friday night right here on Truth Frequency Radio Network for the Anthony Patch Show with the aforementioned Anthony Patch. How you doing, man? Because this has been a bit of a disastrous start. It can only get better from here, right?
Well, we had our first quake right here in the studio. No, this is funny. This is
It was that brilliant new intro music. The two of us were just shaking it and we were dancing away there, and we got lost in the moment, brother. That's what it was.
Yeah, I was hoping the whole song would play, but that's just a taste of it. That's from my good friend Robbie Spencer. He is a professional musician, has his own studio. He was kind enough to send that composition to me last night. He and I have been talking about music and what would be appropriate back and forth. And then he totally surprised me with that. I had no clue he was even composing that. So you're going to hear later on the entire piece. That's just a snippet of it. That's just our intro. And excuse me, we have another piece or two that will be coming to you from Paul Harper. And Paul Harper, as it is electromagnetism. But even more specifically, it is the strong force, the force that binds quantum particles together. It is a nuclear attraction. And in the case of strangelets, these are quarks, 3 quarks. These are primordial particles. These are elementary particles. 3 quarks are bound by a force, which is also a particle, known as gluons, gluing them together. And they call them strangelets because one of the quarks is called a strange quark, and it's been extrapolated to cover all 3. Now, that's the hard physics of it. The headline here is that the denial has been going on for years. And what we will lay out to you a little more detail without getting bogged down in it too far, what Kev and I came up with just this morning are several articles of smoking guns. Absolute proof. Just like we've been saying, we always go to the source material. Okay? We go to their own published and peer-reviewed papers. If you want to know what is going on in present-day science, look to the past. Look to the past and you will see all the developmental and theoretical papers that apply to what's going on today. What is the relevance of strangelets to everyday life? That's what they're going to use to open the portal. But it also, because they've been plummeting to the core of the planet, and I did not mention this on the Clyde Lewis show last night, but Kev, if you have a material that is gathering the material of the core, condensing it, coalescing it, like a black hole scenario, then what you have is the potential to change the spin of the core of the planet. And as you change the core, you change the rest of the planet in terms of its spin. And part of what we got into last night with Clyde Lewis was talking about the Mandela effect. And we were referencing time. We were referencing changes in time. What I'm offering to you as listeners of my and Kev's show here today is material that I have never discussed before. And that is that strangelets now have a 4th dimension. And I say that because the 4th dimension is time. The 4th dimension of strangelets is its ability to change time by changing the rate of spin of the core of the planet and thus the planet itself. Now, we're going to talk about Fukushima and Chile and and the Sumatran earthquakes and how they change time. Time has been changing. The rate of spin of the planet and the core has been changing. Time has been affected by the Strangelet. So that's why they're relevant to us every day. So Kev, go ahead. You take it from there.
No, absolutely. And, one symptom I suppose we could maybe look at for evidence of what Tony's saying here as well. We often hear how the Schumann resonance of the planet is changing. Now, I'm no geologist, but I imagine if you're affecting the core of the planet, that could well translate to changes in the frequency that it's giving off. And you have to think, Tony, as well, with the changes at the core of the planet, we ourselves, our brains are electromagnetically affected. Surely we would start experiencing stuff as well. Absolutely. And this whole Strangelet thing, to go back there as well, Tony, just today, this is when I dug up the fact that it could well be 2005, Tony, they started, dropping these things to the core of the planet. And we often hear you talking about these proof of concept experiments. And one place where they do this, and this came up on the show with Clyde Lewis last night, is Brookhaven Laboratory. Now, they've got something there called the Relativistic Heavy Ion Collider. Now, if people think of this, just a mini CERN, I would expect. But in 2005, they say that a formation of quark matter was tentatively confirmed by results obtained there. Now, the consensus of the 4 RIC, the Heavy Ion Collider, researcher groups was that